There was a report that came out this year where it talks about so many organisations are wanting to implement AI, but actually 46% of employees have said that their organisations are not supporting them with any training or education. What is your HR strategy when it comes to AI? More importantly, what is your AI strategy with employee experience or with mental health? And actually, are they implementing AI effectively in the first place?
Hello, and welcome to the Plumm Pod, where we talk about all things HR and mental health. I'm your host, Georgia, and founder of Access HR. On today's episode, I'm joined by Lorraine Hunt, and we're talking about AI as a tool for mental health strategy. We also speak around the early considerations that all of us need to be thinking about and to keep on our radar. Hello.
Hello.
Lorraine, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you for having me today, Georgia.
I am really excited. So today's episode is all about AI, but we've got a little twist. And before we get into that, Lorraine, I would love if we could take it back a little bit and talk about you.
Okay.
Let's talk about a bit of background so that our audience can really get to understand you a little bit better. And there's one question that I love to ask every single guest, and that is, was HR part of the plan, or did this happen by chance?
Like most people, I fell into HR, of course. So back many moons ago, I worked as a legal secretary in a very large law firm in the city. And one day they said to me, can you go and cover somebody in the training department because they're off sick? I went, I did that. I started out in training. I then had a lovely, most wonderful boss, I think, who said to me, I think you should do a training course and learn more about HR. 35 years later, I've been in HR, but how ironic, I started out in L&D when I was very young, and I've spent probably for about the last 8 years in L&D. So I've kind of done the full circle now.
Back to where you started.
That's where I started.
And that's actually really interesting that you're now back into that space. But let's talk about where you are currently. So you've been in L&D, you've been in there for 35 years, you've progressed throughout your career. Tell me about where you are now.
Okay, so now I am in the AI space, and I kind of fell into that by accident as well. I don't know whether it's accident or design with these things, but I've always been a techie. I've always looked at automating. I've spent a lot of time over the last probably 8 years automating things. And I've spent probably 12 to 18 months using AI in different ways anyway. Last year, I left my full-time job to set up a training company, general training or care training I was going to do. But I went to a business retreat. And for about the first 3 days, I was just helping people with what they were doing, etc. And it was thundering and lightning because it was in Corfu. And we ended up having to decamp to an area, and everyone said to me, why aren't you doing AI and automation? Because that's all you've been talking about for the last 3 days. And a light bulb, Georgia, went on in my head, and it was just kind of that, wow, I'm 57 and
why aren't I using AI?
My passion. So I've coupled the training with the AI and doing services as well.
And we're at such a huge turning point as an HR function at the moment. AI, especially generative and AI, we can add so much more value to training, to the admin function, and it allows us to have much more focus on workplace strategies. And today we're going to focus on AI and mental health.
I know.
And for some of our listeners, this may be something that they've never even thought about before.
Yeah.
And I know from my perspective, I didn't first think that that's an area of my role that I could really capitalize on with AI, in especially using it as a tool.
Yeah.
Do you have any first off tips for anyone who, very similar to me, hasn't thought about this before and is very much starting out with AI and mental health?
The very first thing that I would say is data privacy. Before we move forward about anything else, it's around data privacy and GDPR and all of the things, because there's still a lot of people, and I've spoken to a lot of HR professionals that have not connected those two dots together and are probably doing some things that they probably shouldn't be doing. So yes, I've got lots of tips for people, and it's just around the way that people think about the use of AI, especially with mental health. I myself hadn't thought about it until we'd had a conversation about it. And it's those case studies and the practical uses around people might just be using AI for drafting emails or drafting documents, but there's so much more to it when it comes to mental health, whether that's drafting more thorough health referrals, whether it's identifying trends or patterns, or even predicting things that are happening. And with some of the more advanced tools that are out there, they'll even analyse Teams conversations or Slack messages and identify sentiment through the workforce in that way, or mental health issues before they become a real big thing.
I love that you've just said identifying before it becomes a big thing. I think this is a really key point for how we can be more proactive as a function to identify those early telltale signs by capitalizing with AI.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of any tools or ways that we can identify those sooner?
I won't go through some of the tools because I've not used them myself, and I wouldn't like to recommend ones that I haven't used myself. But it is around the analysis piece, and it's around identifying what is actually going on at an organisational level. And for sure, it's definitely about the predictive elements of it. There are tools out there. People can Google them. People can contact me if they need me to have a look at it, because it's also about, okay, those tools might be claiming to do X, Y, Z, but when it goes back to privacy, are they GDPR compliant? Are they ISO accredited? Where are they storing all of their data? How are they using things? And so it's typically about, is there a way to change HR's reactive stance to turn it more proactive? Because everyone in HR wants that golden nugget that says, as a HR practitioner, I really want to, be a lot more proactive.
It also enables us to actually be more of a partner to an organization by being an early adopter of AI. It has absolutely changed the way that I demonstrate my skills in practice now. I'm actually really able to level up and have more involvement in those high level conversations because I have the opportunity to do so. We were talking then around tools, and this, of course, is the Plumm Pod. And there's one thing that we do have within Plum, which is Emma.
Emma.
I know.
It's amazing. I've not met Emma personally, but as that support function, it's just, I hate to use the word game changer, but it really does make a difference to the people that need it when they need it, because all too often HR get involved too late in the day. But if they've got access to something like Emma,
it's early identifiers. That's how we can find it. And another really good way is that on the platform, there's things like weekly and daily pulse checks of how team members are feeling. So we can start to identify those early telltale signs and look at historically, what are we identifying from this data? We have never had so much data and accessible data in our lives. And honestly, I completely agree. It is definitely a game changer for us.
And with the data side of it, it's around having the right tools. And if you're just using general AI tools such as ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude or something, it's about putting the right prompts in to get the right data out of it. And something really silly that you could do is you could set AI tools up to email your managers automatically to say, have you checked in with your employees this week or this month, or we've noticed X, Y, Z happening. And you can automate a lot of that in the background for managers too.
Why do we think that people are not doing that already? Why are we not thinking about HR and mental health working together?
I think because there's that whole piece around mental health equals privacy concerns. And that is a huge blocker for a lot of organisations, or people don't want to touch that subject. So I think for me, Georgia, a lot of it is around HR, and AI is still quite early on, isn't it? And HR people are concerned predominantly with privacy. You know, they're concerned about how could AI impact mental health. They have probably not thought how AI could help them as a HR function or as a HR professional with mental health in the workplace or even outside of it. And I think for me, employees have got a lot of concerns about AI and what's coming. Is it going to affect their jobs? A lot of employees are resistant to change, for example. But I also think with HR teams, because AI is quite early on, they've not thought about, are we ready for AI?
Yes.
And, you know, one of the biggest things, are they doing AI impact assessments, especially those impact assessments on mental health as well, for themselves, for their employees, etc. And so there's a lot of resistance there. But more importantly, HR teams might not realise what could actually AI could assist them with, whether it's, you know, drafting managers' scripts to help them have the difficult conversations, or even help them save time through some of those other things. You know, we've spoken about the data analysis, etc. Well, once you've got that data, what do you do with it? And HR might not have thought, well, let's feed it into AI and see what AI is telling us we should do with that data or with that information.
I'm so glad you said that, because the one thing about working in HR is you are the last people to get any sort of training.
Yeah.
Yet we are expected to be the drivers of change and transformation.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, we are the AI experts who are leading how this is happening internally. And there is such great things that are coming from generative AI.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. But how can we expect a function to drive it and be the face of transformation and change when we're not investing in them?
Exactly. I think there was a report that came out, I want to say in February this year, where it talks about so many organisations are wanting to implement AI, but actually 46% of employees have said that their organisations are not supporting them with any training or education. So it is around that. Are you AI ready? What's your AI strategy? What is your HR strategy when it comes to AI? More importantly, what is your AI strategy with employee experience or with mental health or with the general fear that a lot of employees are going to have? And actually, are they implementing AI effectively in the first place? Because the chances are most organisations, their employees are using AI already.
I completely agree. And a lot of companies don't have the infrastructure of whether they're on board with it or they're not on board with it. It's just a little bit of a free for all. I like what you just said around we need to begin by building a strategy, and especially for mental health. How can we start to build the foundations of that strategy?
I think for me, it's all around awareness. It's understanding the capabilities of AI and what it could do. And ultimately, it's all about the end user, i.e. the people in the organisations, isn't it? And it's about helping them with their wellness journey. So it's around understanding the capabilities. Yes, you could deliver a wellness strategy. Yes, it could be scripts. But it's around the things like, well, you could produce local guides to signpost people, because typically, and I'm only going from my experience, that more often than not, a lot of the strategic things that HR try to do are put on the back burner to deliver the operational firefighting activities that are done. So almost the project work gets put to the back burner, but is that to the detriment of everyone's well-being? Whereas AI, it can save you a lot of time. It can deliver things that you might not have thought that it could deliver to you.
So if we look into the future a little bit and we look ahead, do you think that there'll ever be a point where AI will fully replace that human interaction, especially with mental health?
No, absolutely not, because AI can do a lot of the things, but people crave human interaction. And so actually, by enabling AI to help with mental health strategies, with the AI chatbot, with Emma, it can alleviate some of the concerns that employees have, but it can alleviate some of the concerns that HR teams and the pressures that they have. AI is never going to replace, but one thing that I'm very, very strong about is that AI will be part of the workforce, and we have to learn and start adapting now to what that looks like.
There's a lot of work to
There
be
is a lot of
done.
work to be done.
The really good thing, though, is we're all learning and evolving. This is completely new to all of us.
Yeah.
And it's changing so fast.
Yeah.
If I think back to when I first started to be an early adopter for AI, one of the biggest things I didn't realize was the responses from AI. It's very much dependent on the prompts that I
Very much depends.
that I put into it. And if I think of where I would start, specifically if I was supporting a team member who was experiencing mental health, I'm just thinking, how can I start with those prompts? What are the sort of questions where I can start? Let's use your occupational health example that you mentioned then.
Yeah.
What are some of the questions that I can, or prompts? What are some of the prompts that I can start to put in?
Okay. So for me, it's always around, before you even think about the prompts, it's around transparency and making sure that your employees know what it is that you're doing. It's even the silly things like asking it to return something in UK English. And if you're researching things, you're asking it for credible research parameters. And it's about choosing the right AI tool to get you the right result, whatever that looks like. And for me, it's around thinking about it. If you had an intern or an apprentice who was doing something for the first time, how would you interact with them? So for me, it's always around, well, what is the context of it? And actually, one of the things that you could do is ask AI to help you with that prompt and tell it what it is that you're trying to do, because the output is only as good as the input. So it would be, let's go back to the Occ Health referral. You'd give the AI the background information to it. You'd say, I'm looking at an Occ Health referral for employee X. This is the situation. Please, if you've got an Occ Health form that you use, you could upload a copy of the form. This is the form that I need to complete. Ask me a series of questions in order to make your output the best that it can be, because then it will ask you the questions that it needs for you to give, or for it to give you the right output that you need.
On that example, do you think we should be asking for consent, going back to the GDPR point, asking for consent from employees to upload their data to a generative AI tool?
I think there should be some sort of consent. And I think as part of any sort of AI implementation strategy, you'd need to look at policies and processes, consent, etc., etc. But I would never upload an employee's name, etc., etc., etc. And I'd keep it very, very generic because we don't know the data security provisions of, for example, ChatGPT. Everything is changing. You've got new AI models that are coming out all of the time. So I personally would never.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because my next question was actually going to be, how can, as HR professionals, we ensure anonymity with AI-driven insights?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we can be doing to ensure that we are keeping that anonymity and confidentiality of our team members when using these tools?
I think, first off, before you're even implementing any of the tools, you need to look at what their accreditations are, where they store all of their data, whether they're ISO compliant, whether they are GDPR compliant, if they store it outside of Europe, what's happening with that data, etc. If you're looking at some of the big tools that are specialising in, for example, sentiment analysis, that kind of thing, if you're looking at open tools such as Perplexity or Claude, Gemini, Copilot, whatever, and the chances are Copilot's probably going to become a big thing because a lot of organisations are using Microsoft already, then it is about ensuring that data is anonymous, but that you're being transparent with your employees. Look, this is what we're doing, this is what we're not doing with it, as far as you're able to do that, of course.
Let's talk about managers.
Let's talk about managers. Okay.
So thinking about AI, and obviously with HR professionals, which is really, really beneficial. But I also think there's a piece here around how we can provide ongoing mental health support for our managers, and how we can get them to also be early adopters with AI for mental health. And if I think of my experience with managers, talking about mental health often comes with a somewhat resistance because of potentially they've not had experience with conversations like this. They find it quite difficult and complex and taboo. How can we use AI tools to facilitate managers to have better conversations on mental health?
Okay, so you could use AI tools for example, you could use it to develop short or even long training sessions for managers. You could even use AI tools, something really simple. You could create a custom GPT to do scenario-based questions and answers that a manager could practice on. You could produce guidance tools or documentation for managers. And you can even just do something simple like every week send them a quick tip. And one of the things that I used to love doing when I worked in corporate HR was just to send a Friday tip. I never quite knew whether people were reading them or not. So when I would get a response, it was really great to get a response from someone, but just something that just reminds them about mental health, to check in, not only with themselves, but with their team members too. But it's also about teaching managers the signs, the risk signs. Even you can analyse performance review documentation to see whether there's anything that jumps out from those documents that could suggest an issue.
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting point, actually, of how we can use the tools to extract potential information that we're not seeing.
Yeah. And with you, with your employee experience specialism, you're looking at not only the organisation, but you're looking at departments or different teams, but you could also look at individuals. So you could have a full picture from just that performance review, not only of training needs, etc., but actually of what else is happening if you're using the right prompts or the right tools in the right way, and you're asking it to look for very specific things.
Such a valuable point. It is for us, and still having that human side with any sort of AI, to add those right prompts. and get better with them. Like I'm asking more and more prompts. I'm getting better with every prompt that I know it is.
I argue with AI all the time and say, why have you returned this? But I know what tools to use for what things. And I will ask AI to give me its thought process. So I can see where it may or may not have gone wrong. But I've got, I've got a lot of custom designed either projects or things that I've trained it. And actually a good AI, if you're using it in that way, is only as good as the training materials. So I make sure everything's around privacy, it's around transparency, it's around GDPR, it's around all of the things that you might need. And you would do the same for mental health. You might ask it to search for certain trigger words, for example, in those performance reviews, that kind of thing. But it's just about understanding and opening your mind as to, well, what is it that I'm doing? Because we are all HR professionals. We're just replacing things that manually might have taken weeks and weeks that can get done in 10, 15 minutes so that we can then focus on the higher impact work.
And that's also an area that we're all striving for. Like, we want to be working on that higher impact. And you just said around saving you time. If I think of historically, like data reports as an example on sickness absence, AI has been a godsend.
But it can identify with your sickness absence trends whether you've got any issues that are impacted through the workplace environment. And why haven't we got wellbeing dashboards? That's something that AI could produce for us, that are included in monthly board reports or monthly leadership reports.
And the technology's there. The technology is at our fingertips, but a lot of the time, especially in HR, we're the last people to use them, and it's advancing so fast. And I do worry that if we don't continue to build our own skills and knowledge, that we're really going to miss out here. There's so much value in using it, not just for admin, which I think a lot of us are using it for admin.
It's not about admin. The admin's the least of it, and that's the bare minimum of it. It's thinking strategically. How can we actually impact the culture, impact the employee experience, impact the people that need it most? Because we've studied a long time to do what we do. And it's just about opening our minds to that creative process of, even the other week, my washing machine broke down. AI helped me fix my washing machine, which sounds crazy, but that's how I think now.
And do you think that's because your mindset has changed?
Yes, because if I go back to 18 months ago, I would get it to write me an email or help me write a sentence about what I'd been up to that week, or if I was doing an announcement or something. Whereas now, if someone looked at some of my chats or some of my AI things, they'd, my daughter, for example, this morning said, can I log into one of your AI platforms? And my first thought was, oh no, I haven't cleared it out. She's going to think I'm crazy. But it is about just opening your mind to the possibilities of it. Oh, and once you get over that mindset hurdle, you'll never look back. And HR, I'm really excited because HR will we've always wanted to sit at the table. This is the opportunity, another opportunity to do that.
And if we take this one step further, what do you think the long-term vision could be for AI and HR?
I think it's going to be, I'm old enough to remember Terminator, so that worries me slightly.
I love the Terminator.
It does worry me slightly. But I just think it's going to be this co-working piece. One of the things that I'm looking at the moment is building AI agents for HR tasks and activities. And sometimes I scare myself with the possibilities of it. I think job roles will change. I think they're going to change for the better. But it's about people embracing those changes and jumping on board, as you've said earlier.
The only thing that's guaranteed in life is change. And I completely agree. We are all definitely going to evolve. Thinking about roles and change, if we look back on your career,
Yeah.
what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
Just try it. What's the worst that can happen?
A message that so many of us need to hear.
Yeah. I remember when the internet first came out and everyone said, this isn't going to work. And I remember being on eBay when you had to press the button and it was just this amazing thing. Embrace AI, because it really will open you up to the possibilities.
I completely agree, Lorraine. We all just need to relax, embrace it, and be comfortable being uncomfortable. There's a lot of fear around AI, and I love today how there's been such a core thread of we need to make sure the prompts, what we're putting into any chat tool, any generative AI tool, we need to be really clear on those prompts. And I know that could have been really helpful. Just like what you said, as an early adopter, I was writing emails, I was asking for this sentence, whereas now, because my mindset has changed, I've evolved, and the scope is really exciting.
For sure, especially with mental health.
Yes.
And some of those wellbeing initiatives could really, really help people. Emma.
We all love Emma. Lorraine, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I've really, really loved it, and I know our listeners will too. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Georgia.
Like this episode? Click here for more HR talk. And if you're just catching up, check out our previous episodes right here.